today's episode, I'm talking to Daniel Lieberman, who is a professor of human evolutionary biology at the Harvard University. Professor Lieberman authored a number of articles, books, and gives lectures on his research findings about how and why the human body looks and functions the way it does. He also enjoys his early morning runs and to have movement as a natural part of his life. Today I'm here with Daniel Lieberman, professor of human evolutionary biology at the Harvard University. Very, very much welcome, sir.
Thank you.
The reason for our talk today is that you have a new book out called Exercised.
I do, yeah. On sort of it's a natural history of how we evolved to be physically active, but also physically inactive, and how that relates to our lives today.
For me, it was a great experience to reading the book, because it's not just a good book. It's also a peek into your life, to your adventure of following all these people that you have been following during your research years and doing your studies. Well,
I was trying to think about how to write a book about exercise, which frankly is not a topic that a lot of people want to read about. So I was trying to figure out how to make it narrative and also honest. So there's no way to do that better than to talk about one's own experiences. And it's true, for the last few decades, I've been trying to go out and try to see how people use their bodies in different environments, in different cultures. And so I've had really a privilege to do that, and I wanted to try to. It's changed how I think about the world, and I wanted to try to help other people see that too. It
changed my perspective totally. I started to follow you some years back, the lectures that were posted on YouTube, for example, and the articles and the book you have been writing in the past. And I'm a runner myself, and got hooked on this, you can call it a hype, when the Born to Run book was released about the Tarahumara runners. And since then, I think the development in the running community, especially in the ultra running community, has just exploded. But I mean, exercise is moving, right? And there is a biological reason why we need to move, why it's necessary for us as a species to move.
Yeah, and I think it's in a way it's sort of, I mean, I understand why people got so excited about ultra running and sort of after that book and barefoot running, but in a way there was sort of a negative side to it, because it's the extreme of physical activity. It's the extreme of exercise, and I think it kind of gives the sense that if you're not doing an ultra marathon or even marathons, somehow you're not a real human being, and that it's like normal to get out of bed and want to run 100 kilometers, and that it's shoes are bad and all this other kind of stuff. It was I think it there's a negative side to some of that, because it really only appeals to a very small number of people, and the vast majority of human beings struggle to exercise. They find it hard to do, and they feel sort of shamed and blamed, and they feel sort of inadequate, and they're made to feel lazy. And I don't know what the title of the book is in Swedish. I think it's called The Exercise Paradox in the Swedish translation. But the reason I titled the book Exercise is that in English, to be exercised means to be vexed and confused and anxious. And I think a lot of people today are very anxious and confused and sort of upset about exercise. They want to do it, but they struggle doing it. So I was trying to write a book not just for the exercise addicts out there, the very small number of people who like to run 100 kilometers, but also for just as much for people who struggle, because it's normal to struggle.
I think you managed to catch that very well in your book when you described evolutionary behavior as I mean, it's about surviving, right? It's about saving energy, not just use it carelessly. And we're not really born to exercise, right?
No, not at
That's
all.
not part of our natural, what do you say, natural biological vocabulary.
Well, I mean, we're born to move, right? Humans, like other organisms, have to move in order to survive. Exercise is physical activity for the sake of health and fitness, and that's a very modern concept. And until recently, nobody did that. It was actually it's kind of an absurd behavior, actually. If you're struggling to get enough energy and you're already, reasonably active in order to get food and to survive, why would you then go for a 5-mile run in the morning, let alone a 26-mile run or a 50-mile run? That's crazy. And yet we have this kind of idea that somehow, if you don't do that, there's something wrong with you. And I think we need to just think differently about physical activity and exercise. And hopefully, by using an anthropological and evolutionary perspective, we can do a much better job of helping us understand how our bodies work and how physical activity works and how exercise works and how it really is healthy, but how it's also a kind of a strange thing to do. I think that the analogy I keep coming to over and over again is that I think we should think about exercise the way we think about education. Education is also a very modern thing, right? Reading, nobody until recently read, nobody, and universal literacy is even more recent, and yet it's a good thing, right? And we in our modern world, and I think we should treat exercise more or less the same way we treat education, something that has become necessary in our world today. And it has a lot of benefits, but also it's kind of a weird thing from an evolutionary perspective.
The comparison you're doing in the book, which really makes the point quite obvious when you're comparing with your experience of the hunter and gatherer society compared to the lifestyle and the society that we live in today. We are not that abnormal compared to them because they don't move that much, do they?
Yeah, no, typical hunter-gatherers, as far as we can tell, they spend about 2.25 hours a day being physically active, getting food. And, that's an average day. So that's not crazy active. That's not like, and then they sit a lot. they spend, almost 10 hours a day sitting. Yet we're told that sitting is the new smoking and made to feel bad for sitting. You and I are both sitting right now. We may be sitting a little bit differently from hunter-gatherers, but let's not demonize something as sort of simple and normal and as sitting. We have this very strange, sort of exaggerated sort of perspective sometimes on how we use our bodies, and it would be wonderful if we just calmed down a little bit and got a little bit more rational and a little bit more, stepped outside of our modern little worlds and looked at the world around us.
The development that we had into, so to say, the modern times, when we started to farm for food, for example, and we started to live together in larger numbers. And is there a point where we started to exercise as a part of our lifestyle?
Well, I mean,
fairly new, or
I don't think there's one time, right? So exercise has different sort of meanings and different, so for example, when farmers were trained to become soldiers and to learn to fight, that was a kind of exercise, right? We actually call them military exercises. That's where the word in English is, at least, and I don't know. But really, the kind of exercise that we think of now, exercise for the physical activity for the sake of health and fitness, that was really a privilege of the wealthy for a long time. So once, during the Renaissance, as the upper classes started to become educated, and exercise was an important part of their education, and that of course accelerated with the growth of the Industrial Revolution and the growth of the middle classes, and so it's got a long, complicated history. There wasn't any like one moment in time when people started exercising, but until recently, most people had to be physically active in order to get by, and it was only very small elite classes that didn't have to be physically active that had to substitute something. And so it doesn't have a kind of single origin. In Germany, for example, the gymnasium movement was really a reaction to by Bismarck and others, but actually Jan was the really founder of it. It was actually a reaction to losses to the Napoleonic armies, and there was a sense that there had to be sort of a nationalistic movement to get the German peoples to be fitter and stronger so that they could beat the French. So it's a complicated story, but it's a modern story.
Lifestyle is changing us, and it's changing us maybe faster and faster, and maybe in a way that we didn't think about at first. But I mean, today we see kind of a health crisis in some ways, and you said earlier that it's very important not to be shaming about this exercising situation. There is nothing to be blamed about not exercising because it's not normal, but maybe there is other things that we adapted to into our modern lifestyles that have created another abnormal situation that we have today. I mean, it's not
of course,
caused by not exercising. It's caused by something else, right?
Well, I think a different way of phrasing it, and I agree with you, is to say, look, today we have to choose to exercise. Right? We have to choose to be physically active. That was never a choice in the past. And that's a hard thing to do. But the fact is the world has changed around us. And if you want to increase your chances of having a healthy life and enjoying your life and getting as much vitality as possible and avoiding disease and reducing the odds of getting sick, then you have to choose to exercise. And of course it everybody knows. You don't need to read this book to know that it yields lots of benefits. I mean, everybody knows that exercise is good for them. Well, almost everybody knows that exercise is good for them. But I think that there are a lot of myths about exercise, and really, and the first being that exercise is normal, that it's sort of normal to exercise, but there are many others, and so that's why each chapter of the book is sort of focused around a myth, that sitting is the new smoking, or that you need 8 hours of sleep, or that that you can't lose weight by walking, or that running is necessarily bad for your knees, and so on. And hopefully that the sort of this perspective can help people help each other, help us help each other really to exercise more enjoyably, to exercise better, to feel better about it, to make less stigma about it. So it's just to kind of change the way we think about it, because there's sort of myths about physical activity and exercise. One of the myths I talk about is the myth of the athletic savage, that if you're not like a Tara Amara, somehow you're abnormal, right?
When we grown into to this modern society, as you say, there is a lot of norms, rules, and ideals that we, for some reason, have to live by, and it's very interesting, this narrative about the superhuman, that we're supposed to find this secret, the secret to the superhuman.
That kind of myth is pernicious. It doesn't help people, right? The idea that somehow if you eat the right food, or take off your shoes, or never use Gatorade or whatever, that somehow you'll unleash the intrinsic athlete in all of us, and if it were that true, then more people would do it, right? It's not that simple. It sounds good. There's a word that we sometimes, there's a modern word that truthiness. It sounds true, so we want it to be true, but it's more complicated. The matter is, though, that we do have a lot to learn from people like the Tarahumara and the Hadza and the Inuit and others, but just trying to pretend that somehow they're kind of intrinsically more some kind of intrinsic basic sort of element that we've lost is not a really helpful way of thinking about it. There are good things about civilization too, and about modern lifestyles too, and I think we can learn from studying other people's. We can learn from an evolutionary perspective all kinds of things that can be just helpful and sort of refocus our perspective, about speed and about strength and about endurance and about dancing and about walking and all the things that we do. And it's fun. It's beautiful. It's how we use our bodies is a wonderful thing. And every human, I think the other kind of side of the coin is the other extreme is our focus on elite athletes. So often, we focus on the best of the best, and they're entertaining and it's exciting. It's, watching Eliud Kipchoge run a marathon is an amazing thing to see. I mean, he's running miles in 4:40 minutes,
Yeah.
4 minutes and 40 seconds for 26 miles. It's astonishing. I mean, I can't do that for 1 mile. But he's not normal either. And we need to kind of, and by focusing so much on elite athletics, sometimes you can learn something from them, but I think we get this kind of biased perspective that can often be defeating to people.
Not just do we get a biased perspective, as you say, but also a lot of elite sport today is not healthy.
No.
It's not healthy to train the way they do, and it's not, most of the sports is not healthy. I mean, there's a lot of injury, right?
Yeah, well, as you know, there's a chapter in the book on sports, right? And the idea that sports is exercise is another one of these myths, right? I think sports evolved for very different reasons than exercise. As I argue in the book, it has a lot to do with controlling reactive aggression and has other sort of social meanings. I mean, it also helps. Play is very important in terms of developing your body and learning skills and all that sort of stuff. But play sort of evolved into sports, but sports has become industrialized and it's become commercialized and commodified. And in fact, in general, exercise has been medicalized and commercialized and commodified. And ultimately, I think that's kind of the root of a lot of the problems that we have, is that by medicalizing and commodifying exercise, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it's limiting and it doesn't solve the problem for most people, right? Knowing that exercise is medicine doesn't actually help you exercise, and having to spend money on it doesn't necessarily make more people do it. Being told just to do it, doesn't actually make people do it. We live in a commercial world, and and medicine is a wonderful field, but it's more complicated than that. And I think we've done ourselves a disservice by over medicalizing and over commercializing something that's very natural.
I mean, you can say that maybe there's two extremes. I remember when I read the article about revisiting the Tarahumara and trying to figure out if there is any superpowers or not. But I think the conclusion was that it's part of the culture. They are doing their job every day in some way. They are walking, or they are dancing, or they are using their body in a totally different way, and it's part of their culture. And the children are using their bodies when they are playing, and there is not that kind of definitions, I think, as sports and exercise and training and things like that. It's just a moving culture. It's part of what they do.
Correct, but yeah, and I think one of the sad things about the book Born to Run was that it doesn't mention the main reason why they run these races.
No,
they run them because it's a form of prayer.
Yeah,
it's spiritual, and that's why they put themselves through that kind of, and they don't have an easy time doing it. It's hard, so they run because they believe it's worth it, and it's part of their culture. I mean, how many Americans or Swedes grow up wanting to be a marathoner or a great runner? In America, people want to play football or baseball or whatever, but almost no kid grows up thinking, I'm going to be a great long distance runner, right? and we do that because we think it's worth it, right? And there's nothing wrong with that per se. But I think we just need to understand that and put it into its perspective rather than mythologizing it.
Maybe there's a different views of lifestyle choice. Maybe we in the Western world here, we are so into measuring everything and competing, and everything should be about performance instead of experience.
Yeah. Well, the Taramara compete too. I mean, let's not I mean, one of the things I do in the beginning of the book is compare this Rara Hippery with the Ironman triathlete. And they're betting, they're competing. It's a serious race. They're not. But so that's human nature. I don't think we should. But that doesn't. But that's a very abnormal, extreme experience. The vast majority of what people do isn't about competing. It's just about living. And I just went for a run this morning. I wasn't competing with anybody. I just went and had a nice run to relax because things are very tense now in the United States, and it makes me feel better. And it was the sun is shining, and it reminds me that I'm still alive, and there's still good things to be had, and my body still is able to do these things, and it's a joy, it's a pleasure, and the first mile or so wasn't particularly fun, but by the end I'm so glad I did it, and it's hard to get out the door, and it's hard to get that started, but the benefits are huge, and just as the benefits are huge for plowing a field or digging, doing things is rewarding, and using your body is rewarding, and importantly, it's what we evolved to do, and as we get older, it's more and more important that we continue to be physically active because physical activity helps us stay healthy as we get older. And you can't understand that. You really, truly can't understand that without an evolutionary perspective. We have this very unusual life history as human beings where we evolved to live after we stopped reproducing. We did that in order to be physically active. And there's this kind of interesting cycle where by being physically active helps us live older, and living to be older actually helps us help our children and our grandchildren. It's fundamental to being a human being.
The way I see it in the society today, we use technology to make life even more comfortable for ourselves. Today, we don't need to do much to survive. No. And maybe that is what kills us at the end, that we don't do anything and we are just decaying before we are supposed to.
Yes, but remember also that people are living really long today too. So, a skeptic could say, gosh, you tell me you have to exercise, but people today are living longer than ever, even though they're exercising less. And that's, I think, one of the reasons people are skeptical about kind of people who oversell exercise, that it's a magic bullet, that somehow it's going to solve all your problems. If you exercise, you're guaranteed to be healthy. And of course, the answer is that's not true. Exercise does reduce your vulnerability to disease. It reduces the likelihood that you're going to get sick, but it's no magic bullet. It doesn't guarantee things. And with modern medicine, people today can live a long and reasonably okay life without exercising. But they're much more likely to suffer from heart disease. They're more likely to get diabetes. They're more likely to have Alzheimer's. They're more likely to have a wide range of chronic diseases that reduce the quality of our life. But I think we have a very poor understanding about the relationships between these things. And often, by the time we figure out that exercise might be helpful, it's too late because the groundwork has already been set. So there's no simple answers, sadly.
No. I mean the lectures I've been following you on YouTube, for example. It's you say that we are evolved to be endurance runners. We have a good endurance capacity. That's our big game in the animal kingdom, not the size of our brain as many people might think.
Well, it's both, actually. I think they're all linked. Having a big brain and being an endurance runner and cooking and food sharing, all of these are part of a package deal. There's not one thing or another thing. Language is also important. I mean, we are, it's part of a suite of packages that made us hunter-gatherers. And it's really that hunting and gathering system that really made us who we are. And that involves everything from having big brains and being cognitively sophisticated and having cultural evolution and language, but it also involves our endurance capabilities and our ability to run and dig and do all kinds of other activities. It's all integrated. It's all connected.
Socrates already at his age claimed that there was great value in physical activity, and I think he pointed it out in a way that it was a waste if you didn't do what you could to gain a good physical condition to use your body.
And remember, who was he teaching? He was teaching the elite of the Greek elite, right? These were the wealthy, right? Because the peasants in the field, they had to be physically active anyway. So the people who had the time and the privilege to go and listen to Socrates lecture, right? They were the wealthy. They were the very few who didn't have to be physically active. So in every culture, there's been people like Socrates who've recognized that among the elites, among people who are no longer required to be active, that physical activity was essential. And you can find it in China and India and every culture. This is not a new idea, and I'm not pretending that I'm in any way coming up with a new idea in this regard. I'm just trying to explain why that is the case and how it actually works.
And I think since you put it in relation to the hunter-gatherer society, it becomes more obvious and more understandable that what we know about both our brain and our bodies today is that we know that it's very healthy, as you said before. We know it's good for us. But in some way, it seems like we lost interest in our bodies. We lost interest in using our bodies for anything other than sitting.
Well, everybody likes to be comfortable.
Yeah.
Comfort is nice, right? And it's an instinct to want to be comfortable. It's an instinct because it's normal, right? And so again, I think we're being really hard on each other when we blame people for having those instincts. And what we need to do is find a way to compassionately and without judgment to help each other overcome our instincts. If you put a piece of chocolate cake in front of me and a carrot, I will definitely want the chocolate cake, right? It's an instinct, right? To go for the food that has lots of fat and sugar, right? Even though chocolate cake is a modern invention, right? But just like, and it, by the same instinct, by the same token, it's an instinct. If you see an escalator and a stairway, it's an instinct to want to take the escalator or the elevator, right? Even though escalators and elevators didn't exist in the Stone Age either. It's an instinct to try to save energy. And so when we tell people, oh, you're lazy because you took the elevator, or you're lazy because you took the escalator, we're basically saying there's something wrong with you because you're a normal human being. You have those instincts. And we do the same thing with obesity. We shame people for having trouble losing weight, and yet, obesity is something that is not really most people aren't obese because they wanted to be obese, or there's anything wrong with them, or they have some moral failing. It's often because of circumstances out of their control, and then it's really hard to lose weight. And we're very judgmental about people who are obese. And I think we should treat people who are struggling to exercise with the same compassion as we should treat people who struggle to lose weight. But we're not going to solve the problem by telling them to just do it or tell them they're lazy. We have to figure out ways to make exercise necessary, make it fun. And really, we can't do that by simply medicalizing it and commercializing it. And that's really, if there's any one fundamental argument in the book, that's the argument of the book.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. Instead of trying to see the performance side of things, that you need to do it because of it, there could be more of a creative way of looking at it, that try to find an enjoyable way of moving instead.
Yeah, make it fun, but also make it necessary. And that's not easy, because we have to today choose to exercise. So making it necessary involves not going to coerce people, which I don't think you can do for adults. Well, except in the Bjorn Borg Sports Company,
Yeah.
which I enjoyed visiting as part of the research for the book. We have to find other ways.
There is a compulsory exercise in school for children.
Sure, for children, right? Because we've long ago agreed in every culture that children can't make decisions on their own behalf, right? So
Yeah.
so we think it's perfectly acceptable and normal to require children to go to school. We require children to do all kinds of things, right? But once you're an adult in our society, we believe that adults have free will and they get to decide what. We can't prevent adults from smoking. We can't prevent adults from not exercising. We can't prevent adults for doing all kinds of things, right? So we have to, unless we want to become a kind of a sort of Stalinist, sort of totalitarian place and force people to exercise, which I don't see happening. We have to help people make it necessary for themselves, right? And that's a challenge, but it's a challenge that we need to rise to because everybody will benefit.
And it's always an interesting aspect when you read stories about people who experienced a traumatic event. Maybe they had a heart attack, or they had someone close to them who experienced an accident or something like that had an impact on their ability to move. Then these people, they change. They make an effort to change their own life. And is there an evolutionary explanation for that? Something bad has to happen before we try another road, so to say?
That's an interesting question. I don't know the answer to that. Certainly, hardship and challenge can sometimes bring out the worst in us and sometimes the best in us. And we don't get to choose the bodies that we inherit from our parents. We don't get to choose the world in which we live. We have to make the best of it. And I didn't decide to be born in the United States and decide to be live during the era of Trump and COVID and all this sort of stuff. I didn't choose any of this, right? So we can either respond by, and nor did I choose to live in a world where I didn't have to exercise, and we have to choose. We have to make choices in our lives, and that's why at the very end of the book I talk about how we need a philosophy of the body just as much as we need a philosophy of the mind, right?
Yeah.
How to live a good life, and how to live a good life involves not only making decisions about how to care for each other and how to make the world a better place, but I think it also involves making decisions about how you want to use your body, what you eat and how you exercise, and those are always struggles. They're not easy. They don't, and sometimes I think we need to be jolted out of our complacency to remind ourselves what's important, right? And I think that's probably what the phenomenon that you're talking about. Yeah, one takes being able-bodied for granted, and then when you lose that, all of a sudden you realize just how important it is. And
yeah, because that is very sad, because when we grow, when we are around 6-7 years old, our brain is kind of developed.
Well, it's full size. It's not fully
it's full size. At that point, we have more or less all the physical capabilities could be treated as optimal. We are very flexible, and we run in the right way if we haven't experienced any problem from birth and up to the 6 years old, and everything is kind of aligned perfectly. So it seems like we have everything with us from the beginning, but then something happens.
Well, I'm not sure if I totally agree. I think that when you're 6 years old, you've got a lot of growing to do, a lot of capability, and I think most of the things that we do well are skills, and you have to learn them. We don't just have them naturally. Running is a skill, just like climbing is a skill, or swimming is a skill, and you have to learn how to do it properly. And I don't think a 6-year-old naturally knows how to run well. They don't, or any more than a then they know how to swim well unless they're taught. So I think, but in the world in which we evolved, people had to learn those skills, right? You would go out with your parents or others in your group, and you would learn how to run, and you'd learn how to dig, and you'd learn how to hunt, and you'd learn how to gather foods and find tubers. And today we do the same thing, except for we learn how to read, and we learn how to navigate, use our computers, and we learn all kinds of skills. But they're all skills, and
Yeah.
and physical activities are no different. But if you live in a world in which you don't learn those skills, and then all of a sudden you're 30 years old and you have high blood pressure, and your doctor tells you you're not, you're about to die, you have to work at it. You're not going to just get them on your own. But if you were 15 years old and decided you want to become a great runner, you also have to work at that too. But it's a little easier when you're 15. I'm the first to admit it. It's easier to learn a violin too when you're young too than to learn it as an adult.
Yeah, and maybe moving and learning goes very well together.
Yeah.
You have some personal experience about the movement in your early school years when you weren't really allowed to participate in sports.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a cliche, but I'm not a great athlete, and I certainly, nobody, when I was a school child, nobody ever picked me, first for any team. I was not I wasn't really good at any of that stuff. I wasn't good at scoring goals. I was pretty good at running, I think, but and that was about it. But really, it's sort of as an adult that I kind of learned that I enjoy it, and it's important to me, and that's one of the reasons why I like running, because it's not really a competitive sport. I just do it because
Yeah.
I find meaning and purpose in it myself. I used to play squash a lot, and I enjoyed that. But I was not ever a great squash player, or a great tennis player, or a great anything. And I think that's an important story, because you don't have to be a great athlete to be fit and to enjoy physical activity and to enjoy fitness. And I think fitness and athletics are not the same thing.
No.
Although we often conflate them.
Yes, I think that's very important, because again, I mean, it's not about performing. If you're into sports, I mean, maybe you want to win and you want to perform, you want to show that you're skilled. But I totally agree with you. You can go in a total different direction. You can go out hiking, or you can do a lot of different things. And
Yeah. But there's nothing wrong with sports too, and
No.
sports are also wonderful. And I don't think they don't serve everybody's needs, right? And it's not all sports and exercise are not completely the same thing. And in schools, for example, a lot of school physical education revolves around, and that has some benefits, but it also has some costs. And we need to figure out how to accommodate a much broader range of personalities and desires and goals and needs for children in school.
Yeah, maybe to introduce movement in a playful way.
Yeah, exactly.
And
there's these studies which show, there are studies which show that in schools, with each increasing year, the proportion of students who are physically active in physical education diminishes, because the teams become more competitive. So as teams become more competitive as you get older in school, the best athletes are the ones who see the most time on the field, and the others warm the bench, right? And so that doesn't really help everybody.
I remember I saw when I did some research for this talk, John F. Kennedy, he appeared in Sports Illustrated in 1960, talking about soft Americans. He expressed some, he had some considerations about people not moving, and they were not fit. And
well, that's a recurring theme in not just American life, but in many other countries, that we're getting soft and flabby, and there are these regular sort of nationalistic programs to try to improve the fitness. Regularly we read about how few Americans are fit enough to be in the army and that sort of thing, and I mean, America might be a little worse than most European nations in terms of physical activity, but we're not. England is pretty close to the United States in terms of physical inactivity, and there's just a lot of variation from culture to culture.
Yeah.
But again, it shows that if you think about kind of countries where physical activity has been most valued, often it's been very nationalistic. Look at communist countries. Look at North Korea and China and Russia and the Soviet bloc. And the Olympics and fitness is not usually politicized, but athletics is often very politicized.
Yeah, we need to do some change, obviously, on an individual level. I think maybe on an aggregate level also. But if we look at the lifespan, if you were about to decide how a recommendation for some kind of preventive exercise for the whole lifespan, how would that look like?
Well, I mean, I think one of the arguments. There's a chapter in the book about dose. About how much exercise you need, and part of the problem is that there is no single answer. It depends on what your goals are, right? And what you're worried about. Are you interested in just living as long as possible? Are you worried about heart disease? Are you worried about Alzheimer's? Are you worried about osteoporosis? Are you worried about, and there is no single. Are you a man or are you a woman? Do you live in the suburbs or do you live in a city? Are you Chinese or American or Swedish or whatever? There's no one prescription, and there can't be. But I think what everybody needs to know is that there's there's some things that are well studied, and one is that a little bit of exercise is better than none, and more is better, and after a while the benefits tail off.
Yeah.
And everything is a trade-off, and there that the core of most physical activity programs is aerobic exercise, so cardio, but weights are important. Doing some weights are important, especially as you get older. And some mixing it up is always a good thing. So really, I think there is no one prescription, and there never can be one prescription. The World Health Organization recommends that the minimum for every person in the world really is that they should get 150 minutes a week of moderate to vigorous exercise, and they should do weights twice a week, and that lowers your rate of dying by about 50%. But if you did less than that, you'd still get some benefit from doing none. And if you did more than that, you'd get a little bit more benefit, although eventually the benefits tail off. There's a huge debate about whether or not you can exercise too much, but that's very few people ever fall into that category, so you don't need to worry about them really.
Yeah.
It's a very small, very unusual group of people. So it's not that complicated really. Some is better than none, and more is a little bit better, and at a certain point you don't get any more benefit, and you should mix it up, and that's not too complicated. But Socrates probably knew that, and it's kind of funny to write a whole book that basically ends up stating the obvious, but hopefully by the time you get to the end of the book, you understand why that's the case, not that it is the case.
Yeah, I think the point you make about inactivity is maybe much more important than about activity.
Yeah, I mean, I thought if you're going to write a book, I didn't mean to start the book that way, but I realized if I was going to write an evolutionary history of exercise and physical activity, that I had to start with the absence of physical activity, of inactivity, because look at it. You and I are both sitting here talking, right? We're not exercising. Well, maybe I'm gesticulating a little bit, so I'm getting a little bit of physical activity, but we're not exercising, and we spend most of our day doing that. Even people who exercise for a living don't spend most of their day exercising. So you can't understand exercise without studying physical inactivity, and they're both important, and we shouldn't pathologize them.
About being exercised, there seems to be a lot of experts telling you what you should do and not to do, and a lot of these things come across as they are contradictory to each other, and sometimes I get the feeling that there is not a lot of science behind this kind of advice that they give. It's more about selling things.
Well, I agree. I mean, and that's one of the reasons in the book I pledge to the reader that I'm not going to tell you what to do. And as you can see, I'm still avoiding that. Partly because there is no one prescription, but also I think one of the subtexts of the book, one of the sub themes of the book, is that one of the reasons people are so confused about exercise, they're exercised about exercise, is the terrible way in which we provide information to the public about health and about our bodies. A lot of what we get comes from sound bites. You click on some news article and it tells you that, I don't know, mushrooms are good for you. And then the next day you read that mushrooms cause cancer. And the next day you read that, you should do high intensity interval training. And the next day you read that you should do lots of cardio. And then the next day you read you should do weights. And no wonder people are confused, because they get in these little kind of bits of pieces. Often the articles are about scientific studies are exaggerated, or they're not put into perspective, or they're about mice and they're not about humans. And that's the way the health information and news is sort of entertainment to some extent. And it's not that journalists are trying to do that. It's just the way our world is structured. And you have to kind of put it all together, really, to kind of figure out what to do and how to make sense of it all. And the way in which we get information doesn't do that for people. So I think it ends up causing a lot of confusion. It causes what we call in English whiplash.
Yeah. I read in the Swedish newspapers today an article about running is not bad for your knees.
That's right.
And
a whole chapter on that.
Yeah, exactly. I just saw it in front of me when I saw the headline of the article, that, okay, maybe he read your book, because the essence of the article was pretty much the same. I mean, we live in 2020 now. There must be more solid evidence than that now to the general public that it can't be dangerous to run.
Well, people do get injured running, so let's not pretend that running
because they do it in the wrong way.
But and people do get knee pain from running sometimes. So let's it's not really what running doesn't do is it doesn't cause arthritis, and that was what they should have said in the article. But I think that there are better ways and worse ways to run, and so there are ways to run that make it much less likely that you'll injure yourself in general, and also get knee pain in particular. But we don't. That apparently is too complicated for people to explain. So because we try to simplify everything, we try to make it super, super simple, and biological things are messy. The world is messy. Our bodies are messy. Biological processes are complicated, and when you oversimplify, you inevitably get things wrong. And I think we should, recognize that people are a lot smarter than we think they are, and give them the information that they need.
Maybe we should teach more about the body in school.
Absolutely. Well, that's what I do for a living.
Yeah, but in lower ages.
Obviously, I agree with that. People don't know how their bodies work. Yeah,
no, we don't know anything today. We are scared of ourselves. We don't know anything about ourselves. I mean, every year we go to take our car to get it through the inspected, exactly. And everyone knows how the car works in general, right? But probably people know more about their cars than they do about their own bodies.
Well, I don't know too much how my car works, but yeah, I mean, that's true though. We don't really know. A lot of people don't really know that much about their bodies, and it would be wonderful if we taught people more, because then they would be able to make more informed decisions.
Yeah, preemptive care maybe is the answer.
Oh, well, of course. I mean, better to not get sick than have to treat a sickness in the first place.
Yeah.
But we devote much less effort to prevention than we do to treatment. So that's the way the world works. You don't go to see a doctor until you're sick.
No, I mean, maybe that's bad by design. The system is not interested unless you are having a real symptom.
I agree.
And when you have the symptom, you get the quick fix. You get patched up.
I agree.
It's been great having you and to talk about your book, and you really take me as a reader, at least, on a good, very interesting journey. And I would highly recommend people to read your book.
Well, thank you. I've been very fortunate in my life, and I've been very lucky. So yeah, but I had fun writing the book too.
Yeah. You have any final advice for people who are looking, watching?
Just just relax and find ways to move that make it necessary and fun. And the best way to make it necessary and fun is to make it social. I think the more we make physical activity social, the better off we all will be. My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.
To some extent, you might say that in our modern society, we need to fight our instincts to live a healthy, normal, and independent life. When you experience a trauma in any way, it makes you aware about your movability that you might have been taken for granted. Today, we also become more aware of the fact that we can't understand the importance of exercise without studying physical inactivity. They are both important in helping individuals to make more informed decisions about their health. Here at Medicalrunning, we practice consciousness. Conscious breathing, conscious movement, and conscious communication.